All right, let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. Members, please take your seats. Sergeant at Arms, please secure the chamber doors. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, we are very pleased this morning to have Reverend Andrew Rutledge of All Saints Episcopal Church in Sunderland, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 27th District. Please rise for the invocation.
Good morning. Good morning. Honorable members of the Maryland Senate, as we gather in this esteemed chamber today, I am deeply honored to offer an invocation as you commence these proceedings. In the spirit of inclusivity and respect for the diverse beliefs represented among you, offer this prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving Creator, as we stand before you in this place of governance, we acknowledge the sacred responsibility entrusted to each of us. We recognize the rich tapestry of faith traditions present in this chamber and the importance of honoring the beliefs of all who gather here. Almighty God, source of all being and sustainer of truth, we invoke your presence among us as we embark upon the work set before this esteemed body. Grant them the wisdom to discern what is just and right, the compassion to understand the needs of all Marylanders, and the courage to act with integrity and fairness. May these deliberations be guided by a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every individual. May their decisions reflect the values of inclusivity, equity, and compassion that are the foundation of our shared humanity. In this time of reflection and action, may this body be united in their commitment to serving the common good and advancing the well-being of all who call this great state home. May goodness flourish in our midst, and may we be instruments of peace and justice in our communities. With wide open hearts to your guidance and grace, we offer this prayer, trusting in your infinite wisdom and boundless love. Amen.
Thank you. Wonderful. Appreciate it. Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th District.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. Thank you all for this morning, this opportunity to welcome in the 48th rector of the All Saints Episcopal Church in Sunderland, Maryland, and Calvert County and District 27. Pastor Rutledge, this will not be your only time that you'll be before us, and we are honored to have you here today. Colleagues, I'd like to, this morning's word from our pastor is tied to Black History Month. You know, today is, and we have a couple days left for that, and I'll tell you why. Frederick Douglass, as we all know who Frederick Douglass is, Frederick Douglass has been sainted. He has become a saint in the Episcopal Church. And on February 20th is the day designated to recognize for Frederick Douglass. So that was brought to my attention today by the pastor, and that's something that we'll make sure we keep in mind as we go forth. I look forward to working with you in the community to continue to spread the word on ensuring that the citizens of Calvert County and the Sunderland area in particular understand our work here in Annapolis and how we can continue to bring about more good works in the community. Thank you very much. And Mr. President, could we have the words of the pastor journalized?
Without objection, most certainly we'll journalize the invocation this morning and thank the pastor for his work, and thank you for that note on Frederick Douglass. I didn't realize that, so it's a good little church fact for us. All right, has everyone recorded their presence in the chamber? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We have some guests. Let's start with the President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I am just so very, very proud to have my wife, Dr. Lauren Alexander Augustine, join us on the floor today. I am so proud that I'm going to subject you all to a little bit of background about her. Dr. Augustine is joining us on the floor because she is a subject matter expert before the Education, Energy, and Environment Committee this afternoon on the Clean Water Act standing legislation that will be there. Lauren is the Executive Director for the Gulf Research Program at the National Academies of Science. She is responsible for overseeing all aspects of management and use of criminal settlement funds, which is $800 million, to spend over the next 20 years from the Deepwater Horizon disaster that were entrusted with the National Academies by the federal government. Prior to joining the Gulf Research Program, she served as Director of Resilient America Program, which supports community efforts to build resilience to extreme events using science and diverse stakeholder engagement. In 2011, the Obama administration used Lauren's definition of resilience in Presidential Policy Directives number 8 and 25, shaping the federal narrative on what resilience is. In addition, she has formerly served as Country Director for the African Science Academy Development Initiative, a decades-long program that built scientific capacity in national academies across Africa. As she also served as the Director of the Disaster Roundtable and as a Study Director for the Water, Science, and Technology Board. Now, outside of her work at the National Academies, Lauren has served on the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Risk and Resilience as a global thought leader. She was a member of the advisory board for the American Geophysical Union's Thriving Earth Exchange Program and is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. She is also a NATO, and that is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Civil Protection Group expert. And in 2014, she revised Article 3 that requires allies to demonstrate national resilience before they can invoke Article 5 associated with the collective defense. And she will be heading to Bucharest in a couple of weeks. So when I tell you, colleagues, that she is out of town, she is in fact out of town, all right? With all of that, she is particularly well-versed in the waters of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, having received her PhD in an interdisciplinary program that combines physical hydrology, geomorphology, and ecology from Harvard University, with her dissertation focused on the forested wetlands of the Chesapeake Bay, which in fact brought us to the eastern shore of Maryland. Colleagues, that's how my wife and I got married in Easton, Maryland. Because Lauren and I actually grew up together in a small town in upstate New York. We met in the second grade. And, that's right, second grade. And she swears that I stole her candy, which I deny, as her partner during the play Oklahoma in the third grade. The rest is that, I did it. Okay, the rest is history. Colleagues, please extend a warm welcome to the love of my life, Lauren Alexander Augustine.
Hey. What I heard is the President Pro Tem married way up, right? Now, it's a good man. I know that drill. Yes.
We just heard about sainthood. It sounds like we may have a new applicant for sainthood.
Fair. Excellent. No, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you. All right, other guests. Yes, Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a special guest and some folks up in the gallery behind you. And if I indulge me for a second, we've got Adi Shechar, who's an Israeli citizen visiting, again from Israel, from Kibbutz, the Kibbutz Elot, and she's a retired Air Force major. And on October 7th, a number of her family members were gathered at Kibbutz Be'eri, and tragically, 3 of her family members were murdered. 7 were taken hostage, and you see her up there. And the women and children were released after 50 days of captivity. Painfully, one is still being held. One of her family members is still being held, Atal Shaham, who is 39 years old. She's here in Annapolis today to represent these families as they struggle with the ongoing hostage crisis and seeking their safe return. And they're here also, the group, to meet some legislators. And so accompanying Adi in the gallery is Zavit Schechter Nassim, a childhood friend of Adi, Mindy Berger, who is a resident of District 15, and Ellie Kagan and Jennifer Brezel Colkin. And so I will say they're here to meet some folks, and immediately after session in the Cade Room in the first floor, James, they will be there for some meet and greet and some conversation. And with that said, Mr. President, I'd ask that our colleagues give them a warm Senate reception. So thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining, and we're so sorry for your loss and ongoing struggles. Thank you for joining us. All right, additional introductions. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I always say this, and it's true, that our staff is very important to us. And so I have one more staffer that I would like to introduce. She's my chief of staff. She runs my office, and she runs it well. And I'd like to give a warm Senate greeting to Danielle Cole.
Welcome, Daniel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for your work. Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. It is my pleasure to introduce the doctor of the day. Dr. Jeffrey Bernstein is a pediatrician from the Fightin' 19th District, and it's a pleasure to have you and making sure that we are well cared for. Thanks for that, Doc.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate our pediatricians. We know thank you for your work. All right, any other introductions before we jump in today? If not, so we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We've got a Senate bill. This is calendar 48. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 1167, Senator McKay, Allegheny County Alcoholic Beverages, Underage Employees, Senate Rules.
All right, bill will be referred to the appropriate standing committee. Let's do the second readers. Let's start with the Committee on Finance, report number 7. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 175, Senator Augustine, State Board of Examiners in Optometry, Criminal History Records Checks, favorable with 3 amendments.
Chair recognizes the senator from the Upper Eastern Shores, floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 175 requires an applicant for an initial or renewal license to practice optometry to submit to a criminal history records check. Amendment number 1 alters the purpose paragraph. Amendment number 2 requires the board to consider certain factors after receiving criminal history record information. Amendment number 3 requires an applicant to submit evidence of having completed a records check in accordance with the bill's requirement. There was no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 175 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 221, Chair, Finance Committee, Health Occupations Boards, Reciprocal Licensure and Certification, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from District 12 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 221 authorizes any health occupations board that does not otherwise have statutory authority to do so to adopt regulations establishing reciprocity for individuals who are licensed or certified in another state that also offers similar reciprocity to individuals licensed or certified by the board. Amendment number 1 alters the purpose paragraph. Number 2 strikes the term jurisdiction from provisions authorizing health occupations boards to enter into reciprocal agreements. Move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 221 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 412, Senator Guile, Mental Health Law, County Mental Health Advisory Committee's membership, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 412 adds an individual with experience with mental health care for veterans or individuals serving in the military to the list of persons that can be appointed as a voting member to a county mental health advisory committee. There are no amendments. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 412 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 600, Senator Kramer, Maryland Medical Assistance Program, Dental Services Coverage and Rate Study, favorable.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 600 requires the Maryland Department of Health to simply study the feasibility of including coverage with minimal benefit restrictions for removable full and partial dentures and reimbursement for providers for house calls and visits to extended care facilities under the Maryland Healthy Smiles dental program. The department must also study the feasibility of setting reimbursement rates for such services at amounts that will ensure providers are reimbursed adequately to provide access to care. There are no amendments, there is no fiscal impact, there was no opposition at the committee hearing. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 600 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 996, Senator Klossmeyer, Advanced Practice, Registered Nurses Professional Liability Insurance Coverage Notification Requirements, favorable.
Thank you, Mr. President,
Yes,
members of the Senate.
Senator, recognizing the vice chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just one step ahead of you today,
Perfect.
you know? Senate Bill 996 requires each advanced practice registered nurse practicing as an advanced practice registered nurse in the state to notify a patient in the writing if the APRN does not maintain professional liability insurance coverage, or number two, their professional liability insurance coverage has lapsed for any period of time and has not been renewed. There are no amendments, there's no fiscal impact, there was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 996 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We'll stick with finance to calendar number 8. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 509, Senator Kramer, Commercial Financing Small Business Truth in Lending Act, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill will look familiar to you. Thank you all very much for doing the right thing last year, passing this bill unanimously off the Senate floor. This bill simply puts in place a framework for disclosures and regulation within the commercial financing transactions segment of lending, predominantly to small businesses. The problem has been, continues to be, that this is an industry that victimizes and preys upon our small business owners, our mom and pop businesses. To their credit, much of the industry, the good players, have come in 100% support of this legislation. However, there's still some bad actors out there that don't want to be regulated. They want to be able to victimize our small business owners. Colleagues, there were 2 amendments. Amendment 1 exempts premium finance agreements from the bill. Amendment 2 clarifies the applicability of a certain reporting requirement relating to sales-based financing. Once again, this bill passed unanimously in committee both this year and last year, and off the Senate floor last year. Mr. President, I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 509 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 633, Senator Klossmeyer, Maryland Self-Service Storage Act, Sale of Personal Property and the Satisfaction of Liens, Means of Advertising, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 633 authorizes a self-service storage facility operator to advertise a lien sale by email or a website without the occupant's prior written authorization in the storage agreement. The amendment alters what must be stated in the rental agreement and moves up the effective date to June 1st, 2024. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 40th District has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a floor amendment.
Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Give us just a moment to get it up and distribute it. All right, Senator may describe the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an exceedingly friendly amendment. This is a great bill, a very, very great bill. It modernizes the advertising requirements when individuals have excess storage left over. This bill, the small amendment is turning may until shall, just saying that they shall advertise on one of the three platforms, whether it's email, website, or whatever. We were not sure in committee if it gave the flexibility for them to advertise or not. We wanted to make it quite clear that they would exercise one of those options to advertise to the public when people leave excess storage behind. I move for adoption of the amendment.
Senator moves the amendment. Let's check with the floor leader.
Well, in order to continue having storage wars on TV, I'll accept the amendment.
All right. Committee sees it as a friendly amendment. Any objections from members on the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. All right. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 633 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 694, Senator Feldman, Maryland Department of Health, Health Commissions, and Maryland Insurance Administration Study, favorable.
Recognized senator from the 37th District is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 694 requires the Maryland Department of Health to contract with an independent consultant to study the Health Services Cost Review Commission, the Maryland Healthcare Commission, the Maryland Community Health Resources Commission, and the Maryland Insurance Administration to identify potential overlap in the duties of these agencies and recommend any changes in administrative structure that may improve the effectiveness and efficiency of these agencies. There are no amendments, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 694 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 701, Senator Bidle, Maryland Health Benefit Exchange, State-Based Young Adult Health Insurance Subsidies Pilot Program and Amount of Annual Subsidies, favorable. This is an emergency bill.
Recognizing chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of years ago, we passed a $20 million fund to subsidize young people so they would buy health insurance and help the cost of our overall individual market. So for the first 2 years, we didn't use all the money, and it's sort of laying in a fund at the Maryland Health Exchange. This year, we've increased the demand, and we need more than the $20 million. So all this bill says is they can go back and take money from the prior 2 years that had leftover money. So there are no amendments. It was unanimous in committee, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 701 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 821, Senator Feldman, Maryland Insurance Administration Professional Employer Organization Study, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize the chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this Maryland Insurance Administration bill is about professional employer organizations, and it's a study. So currently, a professional organization like a group of engineers or architects can buy like disability insurance and life insurance. But what this bill does is it will study these small PEOs, professional employee organizations, to allow them to buy group insurance. It's for small employers, but it would allow them to kind of group together and be able to maybe get a better rate on their small group insurance. The amendment makes technical and clarifying changes to elements of the study. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 821 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. One more with finance. Calendar number 9. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 98, Senator Salling, Department of Housing, Community Development, Food Desert Study, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize Senator from District 40 is the floor leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 98 requires the study of food deserts in Maryland. The study must include recommendations to reduce the number of food deserts in the state. The bill terminates June 30th, 2025. The amendment requires the existing Interagency Food Desert Advisory Committee to conduct the study rather than the Department of Housing and Community Development, adds additional duties and items to be studied. There was no opposition at the committee. I move the amendment in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 98 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 119, Senator Lamb, Legally Protected Healthcare, Gender Affirming Treatment, favorable.
Recognize the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 119 protects, based on laws enacted last year, all individuals involved or associated with lawfully provided gender-affirming care in Maryland from other state actions. Colleagues, you'll recall that last year we had a bill that codified gender-affirming care in the statute. This bill does not relitigate that. This simply adds gender-affirming care to be protected care under legally protected care that already exists in the statute, particularly for electronic medical records. There are no amendments. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
Yes, Mr. President. I just looking at this bill, and I really haven't had the opportunity to really get into it. But so, if I could have the opportunity, maybe looking into an amendment, if I could special order it
For a day?
for a day, yes, sir.
Any objections from the committee? All right. Without objection, we'll special order the bill until the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Tomorrow. All right. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 374, Senator Waldstreicher, State Emergency Medical Services Board, License and Certificates, Application Requirements, favorable.
Recognizing the chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Consistent with legislation enacted last year for licensed healthcare occupations and professions, Senate Bill 374 prohibits the State Emergency Medical Services Board from requiring that an applicant provide proof of lawful presence or have specified identifying information as a condition for licensure or certification to provide emergency medical services. Instead, as with other regulated healthcare occupations and professions, the board must use an applicant's Social Security number, an individual taxpayer identification number, or alternative documentation permitted by the Federal Social Security Act. There were no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 374 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 403, Senator Klossmeyer, Hospitals and Related Institutions, Residential Treatment Centers, Accreditation, favorable.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 403 expands the number of organizations from which a residential treatment center may seek accreditation for the purpose of licensing by the Maryland Department of Health. In addition to the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, a residential treatment center may seek accreditation from the Commission on an Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities or the Council on Accreditation. And I must say this is very needed for the organizations which give residential treatment, because we are lacking them in the state of Maryland. So, but there are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 403 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Education, Energy, and the Environment, report number 12. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 377, Senator King, Higher Education, Teacher Development and Retention Program, definition, favorable.
Recognized senator from the 35th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill expands eligibility for teacher development and retention program educator stipends, a pilot program that terminates in June of 2029, and gives both initial stipends and internship stipends to include an otherwise eligible individual who is initially enrolled in any Maryland community college. When this came out last year, there were 2 community colleges. This makes it available for all 11. There are no committee amendments. I'd move for adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 377 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 441, Senator Bidel, Janet L. Hoffman Loan Assistance Repayment Program, Nancy Grasmick Public School Professional Award, School Nurses, favorable.
Recognize the Vice Chair of the Committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we know that there is an enormous shortage in healthcare workers, and that's especially important in our public schools. There is an average of 0.75 health professionals in each school, and yet in some parts of our state, rather than 1 nurse per 848 students, it's as bad as 1 nurse per 1,500. This bill fixes an oversight and makes sure that loan repayment is available for nursing students who want to work in our public schools. There were no amendments, no opposition. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 441 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 500, Senator M. Washington, Education, Child Care, Career, Professional Development Fund, alterations, favorable.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill amends an existing program that supports child care and professional development. Currently, it provides tuition assistance for child care providers to allow them to meet the criteria that we have set under the blueprint, which is to obtain college education, credits, certification. The funding is available for child care providers who earn a college degree. This bill revises the program to prioritize funding. It increases the hours of applicants must work from 10 hours to at least 20 hours. And third, if the award recipient does not meet the program requirements, they must repay the funds so that these funds can go back into the system. Of course, it was made clear that if anyone's not able to repay due to financial problems or burdens, that we will address each case one at a time. There are no committee amendments. There was a unanimous committee vote, so I move for the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 500 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 517, Senator A. Washington, Next Generation Scholars of Maryland Program Administrator, alterations, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thousands of young people in Maryland have benefited from this program, and this bill simply moves it from MSDE, the Maryland State Department of Education, to MHEC, where it fits better, the Maryland Higher Education Commission. It does require MSDE to continue its support and marketing and outreach. There were 2 amendments. The first was technical, and the second one does exactly what I just described. It passed unanimously. Move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 517 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right. Let's go to calendar 13, Education, Energy, and the Environment. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 148, Senator A. Washington, jointly considered by EEE and B&T, Comprehension Flood Management Grant Program, funding for underserved and overburdened communities, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 43rd District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is also an adjustment to an existing program that provides resources to our communities that are impacted by flood. This bill also creates an appropriation, as drafted, created an appropriation for the state's comprehensive flood management grant program. It directs funds to counties for flood mitigation. This bill would require that 40% of the funding provided under the program go to those communities that are in census tracts that are overburdened or underserved. In this context, overburdened and underserved is defined in our law as having 25% of the residents as low income, at least 50% identify with an underrepresented group, and at least 15% have limited English proficiency. Adding these terms makes the legislation consistent with our Climate Solutions Now Act. There are committee amendments, which I will describe. One adds sponsors. The second adds another category called areas at extreme risk of flooding. We wanted to further clarify overburdened in an environmental context as well as the other measures that we used. And so this is an area that has 90% of the households that are extreme risk of flooding over 30 years. It also there's an amendment to remove the mandatory appropriation and says that the governor is authorized to include up to $20 million. The vote was unanimous. I move for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 148 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 258, Chair, Education and the Environment Committee, Department of General Services, State Building and Facilities, Energy Conservation and Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reductions, favorable.
Recognizing Senator from District 3 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is a departmental bill from the Department of General Services. It simply codifies and implements a provision in the governor's executive order dealing with more aggressive goals for reducing energy consumption in state-owned buildings. This was unanimously approved by the committee. There is no fiscal impact, no amendments. Therefore, I move the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 258 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 305, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Department of Natural Resources, Maryland Geological Survey Fund, establishment, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 38th District as the floor leader.
Good morning and thank you. Senate Bill 305 is a departmental bill. It establishes the Maryland Geological Survey Fund in the Department of Natural Resources to finance the direct and indirect costs of administering the Maryland Geological Survey. And that's including long-term budgeting and planning for survey projects, procurements, and equipment purchases. There are no committee amendments, and I move for a favorable report on SB 305.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 305 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 547, Senator Alfrith, Wildlife Traveling Animals Act, Prohibition, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize the senator from District 3 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill prohibits, with a specified exception, any individual from allowing the performance of covered animals, and covered is defined in the bill, in a traveling animal act. However, this does not apply to fixed locations. There is one committee amendment, although clouded leopards are included in the bill, it does exempt that particular species when being transported for the purposes of either education or conservation. I move the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a quick question about the bill.
Will the floor leader yield?
Sure.
Senator may proceed.
Certainly.
So if there's a performance, would the bill prohibit someone from bringing the animals to the performance? So just say hypothetically, it was a 4-H event, and part of that was a demonstration with some wild animals, whether it be a zebra or camel or something of that nature. Would they be able to bring the animals to the event?
Well, it depends whether the animal is covered in this bill. By covered, I mean bear, cougars, elephants, jaguars, leopards, excluding clouded leopards under the circumstance I mentioned, lions, non-human primates, and tigers. So those are the only animals covered in the bill. They can't be transported, but they could be exhibited in a fixed location. For example, the Catoctin Wildlife Preserve. That's fine, just no transporting.
Thank you. I'll go through the bill and look at those
Thank
specifics.
you for the question.
All right. Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I love animals. I don't want animals being abused, but I need a little bit more definition of non-human primate. Also, you got a lot of shows that go throughout the state of Maryland. You have dog shows. You have other types of shows. You have
Excuse me, Senator, just really quick. Is that a question for the floor leader?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Senator, may proceed.
So the thing is that I think we have to be a little bit more specific on this because I think it's not. Is there more defined in ways where we can say it's specifically, I understand bears and tigers, lions and tiger bears, oh my, but anyway. The other shows that are there, and you have fairs that have also these types of acts, and you're saying acts. So is it specific in that?
Dogs are not included in this bill. The only animals that are included are the ones I specifically mentioned.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
All right. Chair, we're going to senator from District 7.
Yeah, I just have a couple more questions, but I don't have them right now. I'm kind of reading up on it. Can I just ask the bill and amendment lie over under the rule?
Senator's motion's in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over in the rule.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 553, Senator Quarterman, Maryland Zero Emissions Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council membership. Favorable with 2 amendments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill relates to the composition of the Maryland Zero Emission Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council. It used to be called the Maryland Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council. It's been around since 2011, and it was designed and established to develop plans to expand the adoption of electric vehicles and develop an infrastructure charging network. What the bill does, it alters the composition over the years. We've altered the composition of this council. So this bill alters the composition in a couple of ways. It adds the Secretary of General Services, number one, to make it consistent with the Climate Solutions Act. Actually gives Secretary of General Services some responsibility with EV development. And number two, another member is added so that the existing representation from a plug-in electric drive vehicle manufacturer can be bifurcated to encompass both light and heavy-duty vehicle manufacturers. There were 2 committee amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 makes one other adjustment to the composition of the council, adds automotive dismantling and recycling industry representative, which is now topical when we talk about electric vehicles. So with all that said, Mr. President, I'd move the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 553 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's see, is that the end of that? One more. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 916, Senator Brooks, Fish and Wildlife Endangered and Threatened Species Definitions, Petitions, and Regulations, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill codifies the way in which the Department of Natural Resources identifies and reviews endangered and threatened species. There's one committee amendment that alters the definition of wildlife within the non-game and Endangered Species Conservation Act. Yeah. I move the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 1 committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Any discussion of the amendment? Yes, chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just move that the bill and the amendment lie over under the rule, please.
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will lie over under the rule.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, the next order, still with. Another one from Education, Energy, and the Environment, plowing through. Workhorse Committee this year. Calendar 14. Clerk will read the first bill. Well, they're all workhorse committees. This is like the Clydesdale of, the donkey? No. Right. Yes. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 298, Chair Education and the Environment Committee, State Board of Electricians Licensing Penalties, favorable with 2 amendments.
The Liger? Is that the? All right, yes. Recognize the senator from District 9 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this departmental bill authorizes the State Board of Electricians to assess a licensee a civil penalty of up to $5,000 for each violation of the licensing statute. The civil penalty can be assessed instead of or in addition to other penalties, including a reprimand or the suspension or revocation of a license. In determining the amount of the penalty, the board must consider the seriousness of the violation, the good faith of the licensee, and other related factors. There are 2 committee amendments. The first makes technical changes, and the second requires the board to conduct a study by October 1st. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report, recognizing the minority whip on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the floor leader would yield for question.
Floor leader yield.
On this bill, what does the penalty, was there already a fine in place? I didn't see it in the bill. This is adding a fine in lieu of penalties as an option? You were explaining it, but I want to be sure I understand. Is it?
So in the bill that says that in addition to revoking the license, they can do the fine.
And these kind of violations, are there some examples of what somebody practicing without a license or doing what they're not supposed to do? They don't have a...
I mean, if you look at page 2 of the bill, there's a ton of examples.
Okay.
I could read them.
No, that's fine. Let me, Deceptive practice. Okay. Okay. So this is adding a civil fine on top of you just losing your license, in other words, is what the bill does.
Or instead of. I mean,
Or instead of.
I think one of the things you could consider is that if it's a small violation, because you're looking at the scale of the violation, you might not want to revoke their license. You might want to give them a fine, and this fine is up to $5,000.
Okay, up to, great, and then it's also and the money does it go to the general fund or does it go to the board? That's probably in the fiscal note. I didn't see it, but
We're checking with committee counsel. I'll just note that there was discussion about how this brings it into a line with the other boards' practices.
okay.
The actual penalty is going to the general fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District.
Yeah, Mr. President, can I lay this over under the rule?
The motion would be in order. The bill and the amendment will lay over under the rule. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 411, Senator Guile, Department of Veterans Affairs, renaming and duty Secretary of Military Families Policy and Programs, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the bill sponsor, oh, nope, not the bill sponsor. Senator from District 10 is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 411 renames the Maryland Department of Veteran Affairs to be the Department of Veterans and Military Families, and the Secretary of Veteran Affairs to be the Secretary of Veteran and Military Families. The Secretary must appoint a Deputy Secretary of Military Family Policy and Programs. The Deputy Secretary, 1, must serve at the pleasure of the Secretary, 2, is entitled to salary provided in the state budget, and 3, must direct programs, policy and programs related to military families. The bill also makes a series of conforming changes. The bill takes effect July 1, 2024. There is one committee amendment which adds co-sponsors. I move the adoption of the one committee amendment and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Appears so. Chair recognizes the senator from District 7.
Thank you. Just a quick question.
Yes.
Why are we doing this? You know, we've had several bills over the past few years where we've shortened the name of agencies. You know, now we're Department of Commerce. This kind of expands it now. Why are we passing this legislation?
Yeah, as you know, oftentimes the veteran gets all of the acknowledgement, and then when that veteran goes to war, his family goes with him. So this is just a way to acknowledge the contributions that the family members are making as well.
I appreciate that, because that is true.
Yes.
You know, when we're, I've never deployed, but when we're away for training or deployed, we're focused on our job, but it's the spouses at home that are keeping everything afloat. So, okay, I appreciate it, and thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
Excellent. All right, any further discussion? If not, on the committee amendment, any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 411 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 522, Senator Augustine, Charter Counties, Enforcement of Local Laws, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have not updated the amount that the counties are able to impose in fines, an up to number, since the 1990s. So what this bill does is increases from 1,000 to 5,000 the maximum civil and criminal fines that may be imposed by a charter county for the enforcement of an ordinance, a resolution, a bylaw, or a regulation adopted by that county. There are no committee amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 522 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 524, Senator M. Washington, General Assembly Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs, Gender Neutral Language, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is rather straightforward. Anywhere in the state section, government article, where there are references to the term chairman, chairmen, co-chairmen, we're simply using the term chairs. And to clarify, this bill does not apply to the entire code. Additionally, going forward, our staff and our bill writers have been directed to use this terminology going forward in all bills, but unless there is a bill that addresses specifically our part of the title, it's not going to be changed. So this does it. There's no fiscal impacts. There are no committee amendments. It passed unanimously. I request an adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Chair recognizes Senator from District 7.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator has a question for the chair, for floor leader?
Yes, sir.
Senator may proceed.
So just a question, and I understand what you're trying to do here. So it's going to be strictly just chair? Why don't we say chairperson?
I think that is too much ink.
Ink's pretty cheap. I mean, let's be honest. We're talking about a person. I just look at this committee chair. You know, some people might read it.
Are you saying a chair is not a chair unless someone's...
No, I understand what you're saying. In short abbreviation, we refer to say, hey, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mrs. Chair, or Madam Chair.
Yes.
I don't know why we just don't refer to it as chairperson if we don't want to have a gender reflection on it. I just think...
Mr. President, I'm sure if there wishes to be an amendment, but it seems that the direction that DLS has been given is that we use the terms chairs. If we did chairperson, it would be inconsistent with the current policy.
Well, that's why we change things. Mr. President, can I just ask for 1 day hold just to kind of look?
Let's see. The Senator's moved to special order the bill. I think that's probably... Are there any objections to special order? All right, if there's no objections, let's go ahead and special order for a day. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 564, Senator Watson, Real Estate Brokers Licensing, License Renewal, and Continuing Education, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill makes numerous technical and procedural changes to licensing and continuing education requirements for real estate brokers, associate real estate brokers, and real estate persons simply to bring these processes into the 21st century. There are 2 committee amendments. Amendment 1 adds co-sponsors. Amendment 2 removes a reasonable processing fee and instead requires a reinstatement fee for purposes of continuing education and restores the required course content for a continuing education course. I move the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 564 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Let's go to budget and tax. We've got report number 4. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 181, Senator McCray, Qualifying Nonprofit Organizations Training and Reentry Services Funding, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from 45th District as floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 181 amends authorize the governor for fiscal 2026 through 2028 to include each year in the annual budget an appropriation of $1 million. The funds will be used solely as an operating grant to qualifying nonprofit organizations for the purpose of providing training to formerly incarcerated individuals in automotive repair, Mr. President. The Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services must administer the respective grant funds in accordance with existing provisions related to the grant program. A qualifying nonprofit organization that receives a grant pursuant to the bill must submit for the fiscal years specified information. The Executive Director of GOCP-YBS. The bill takes effect July 2024 and terminates in June 2028, Mr. President. There are committee amendments. There are 2 committee amendments, Mr. President. One adds sponsors and makes technical changes to the purpose paragraph, and the second authorizes rather than requires the governor to appropriate funding in the annual budget. Move adoption of the amendment, Mr. President, and a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 181 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 183, Senator Bailey, State Procurement, Prompt Payment of Suppliers, favorable with two amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 183, as amended, requires contractors on state contracts to promptly pay suppliers any undisputed amounts that is owed, and otherwise add suppliers to the state statutory prompt payment regulations. A supplier is defined as a person that has supplied labor or materials to a contractor in the prosecution of work provided for in a state procurement contract. There were two amendments. Amendment 1 is technical changes to the title. Amendment 2 alters the definition of supplier to mean the person who has supplied labor or materials to a contractor only, not to a subcontractor, and requires only contractors to promptly pay suppliers undisputed amounts. I move for the adoption of the two amendments and the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Oh, on the discussion on the amendments, Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Yes, thank you. Would the floor leader yield for a question?
Senator may proceed.
Under the bill, is there a penalty provision in the event that these contractors or suppliers are not promptly paid?
I do not believe so.
Should there be? I'm just, in order to incentivize the government to be doing this, because I know this is a problem we have heard in the Finance Committee repeatedly, that these contractors who are doing these jobs are not getting paid timely. I just was curious if the committee had contemplated some kind of incentive to ensure.
So we did not discuss that. The issue that we're trying to solve here obviously is something that I think you've addressed in the past also. It took us 5 years to just pave a road through a town. And the issue was
that Leonardtown?
It was Leonardtown. Yes, it was. And it took us 5 years to pave a road, and all the subcontractors, none of them were paid. And they had to, and the state offered them no ability to go after that money. And they just walked away from it.
All right, Mr. President. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I am the floor leader.
I was going to say I do not believe that the suppliers are not protected under this bill either.
Okay. All right. With that, Mr. President, could I ask that the bill be laid over under the rule?
Senator's motion is in order. The bill and the amendment will be laid over under the rule. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 434, Senator King, Education State Library Resource Center funding, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Senate Bill, thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 434 alters the funding for the State Library Resource Center by phasing in an increase in the per capita funding amount from $1.97 per state resident to in fiscal year 2024 to $2.24 per state resident by fiscal year 2027 and thereafter. There are two amendments. The first adds co-sponsors. The second begins to phase in fiscal year 2025 instead of fiscal year 2026, and ends the phase in fiscal 2027 instead of continuing to increase through fiscal 2031. Move the adoption of the amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 434 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 440, Senator Alfrith, income tax credit venison donation, favorable with one amendment.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 30th District as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, something all of our districts seem to have in common is what feels like an overpopulation of deer wreaking havoc on our farming community, leading to tens of thousands of collisions with vehicles. Senate Bill 440 is one answer to that larger problem. It's a piece of the puzzle. It reestablishes the income tax credit for venison donation when hunters kill an antlerless deer and donate the venison to food banks. It reestablishes the program that has sunset a few years back. It increases it to $75 per deer donated with a cap of $600 altogether. When it was established, Mr. President, it proved to be a very successful program, getting 5,000 deer off of farmland and donated to food banks. There is one committee amendment to add sponsors, and the vote was unanimous. I move the one committee amendment in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment in the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District.
Thank you. Would the
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
So I was just curious about the cap. So it's at 8, which would be $600. Why is that cap so low? As we're struggling with the issue with deer damage for crop ground and whatever. So
Right.
I was just wondering, why was that set, that number not higher?
It is an effective program, but we did want to limit the fiscal impact to the state, so the committee settled on 600. It's up from, I think it was 300 under the last program, iteration of the program, so it is an increase from before, but we did want to limit the fiscal impact.
Okay, that's progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the report? Any objections to the report? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 440 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 678, the President, income tax technical corrections, favorable.
Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 678 is at the request of the Comptroller. It makes a technical change to Maryland Tax General Article from 1990, fiscal year 1990, on an erroneous cross-reference dealing with the Housing Community Development article. This fixes that. There's no fiscal note, not even to 1990. There's no fiscal note. This is just technical. No amendments. Move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 678 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 693, Carroll County Senators, Carroll County Public Facilities Bond, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a local bill for Carroll County, which authorizes the Carroll County Commissioners to issue up to $29.8 million in general obligation bonds for the acquisition, construction, improvement, and renovation of public buildings, facilities, and public works. I will say, we know there's a lot of costs are going up, especially with paint. It's going to have to skyrocket, as we've heard over the last few weeks. So this bill is definitely needed in Carroll County. There are no amendments, and I move favorable on the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 693 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 776, the President State Investment Portfolio Investment Standards, favorable of two amendments. This is an emergency bill.
Recognizing the chair of the Pension Subcommittee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is an emergency bill that repeals provisions relating to the type of asset classes that the State Treasurer may invest and reinvest specified unexpended or surplus funds. The bill specifies that these investments must be made in accordance to the limitations for the asset classes and thresholds established in regulations. The State Treasurer must also provide the local governments with an opportunity to review, revise, and report any changes to the local investment policies as appropriate State Treasurer must adopt these by December 1st, 2024. There were 2 committee amendments. One amendment makes it technical, a technical change in the title. The second amendment clarifies the requirement of the State Treasurer to consult with local governments and clarifies the authority of the Treasurer or local entity to retain investments made prior to the effective date of this act. Move the adoption of the 2 amendments and the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Never heard the term supranational issuer. Never heard of that one before. All right, on the amendments, any discussion? Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from the 28th District.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. May I
question
ask
for the floor leader?
Yes.
Senator may
Okay.
proceed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm always curious when I see the president as far as the sponsor of the bill, the origins of this bill. Did you work for this bill? Is it the treasurer or the governor's office? Do you have that information?
I do. Mr. President, we are working with the State Treasurer's office through the treasurer, sort of like when we do a department bill for the governor. This is for the treasurer.
So this is more a treasurer's bill. Yes. Okay, and this is their input as far as the investment strategy.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Floor leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Excellent. I think this one was by request, right? This is a by request.
By request.
Yep.
By request of the treasurer.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? On the amendments? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is amended as adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 776 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. We have another one on 2nd reader here. This is Special Order Calendar number 24. I think we were waiting for an amendment on this one. Let's see if we have it. Clerk, read the bill.
Senate Bill 501, Senator McKay, Handguns, Wary Care and Transport Laws Handbook Publication. Bill is on 2nd reading and open to amendment.
All right, we were looking for an amendment on this one. Recognize the bill sponsor.
Mr. President, after further review, I do not have an amendment, sir.
Do we want to, so we ready to move forward with it?
Please, sir.
All right, are there any other amendments? If not, Senate Bill 501 is ordered printed for 3rd reading. All right, let's see. Okay. Let's do Madam Clerk, if we could ring the bells, and if we could do a quorum call, or Madam Secretary, if we could ring the bells.
Mr. President?
All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? Almost. As we are we are joined by the students of the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, Bliss students. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. If we could give them a warm Senate welcome. Great to see you all. Wonderful school. Wonderful school. All right. Everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 45 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We have 3rd reading calendar number 22. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 29, Senator Kagan, General Assembly Special Election to fill a vacant seat in office. This is a constitutional amendment.
Senate Bill 29 is on 3rd reading for final passage. This is a constitutional amendment. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 29 have received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 132, Senator Carter, Correctional Services, Medical, Parole, Life Imprisonment.
Senate Bill 132 is on 3rd reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 33 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 132, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 135, Senator Ellis, Work Group to Study Funding for the Western Port Wastewater Treatment Facility Establishment.
Senate Bill 135 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 135, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 165, Senator Heddleman, Education, Coaches, Mental Health Training.
Senate Bill 165 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 165, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 180, Senator Hester, Public and Non-Public Schools, Auto-Injectable, epinephrine, and broncholators, Use, Availability, Training, and Policies.
Senate Bill 180 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 180, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 192, Senator Kramer, State Personnel, Collective Bargaining, Supervisor, Employees.
Senate Bill 192, third reading, final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 34 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 192, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 206, Senator Smith, Condominiums, Common Elements, Clean Energy Equipment.
Senate Bill 206 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 38 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 206, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 268, Chair Education and Environment Committee, Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Critical Area Program Enforcement.
Senate Bill 268 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 35 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 268, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 192, I need to change my vote from nay to yay.
Do we have the form?
I don't know. Do I go up there and get it?
We'll have, this is the first one of the year, first one of the year.
Exactly.
All right, we'll have the pages, we'll
Thank you.
run it back over, and we'll go back at the end of the next calendar, once we have it. All right, let's go to calendar 23. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 271, Chair Education and the Environment Committee, Election Law Revisions.
All right, Senate Bill 271 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 271, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 299, Chair Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Coast Smart Council, Duties and Authority.
Senate Bill 299 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 299, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 333, Senator Heddleman, Housing and Community Development, Affordability Housing, Identifying Suitable Property.
Senate Bill 333 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 333, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 367, Senator Mounts Natural Resources Antlerless Deer Hunting Programs Authorization.
Senate Bill 367 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 367, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 418, Senator Watson, Seed Community Development Anchor Institution Fund Alterations.
Senate Bill 418 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 418, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 425, Senator Heddleman, Maryland Meals for Achievement in Classroom Breakfast Program Alterations, Maryland Meals for Achievement Flexibility Act of 2024.
Senate Bill 425 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 425, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 461, Senator Watson, State Real Estate Commission Complaints Advertising Violations.
Senate Bill 461 is on third reader for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 461, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill. Oh, I'm sorry. We're on to 24. Let's go to the first bill on calendar 24. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 462, Senator Watson, Licensed Real Estate Brokers Branch Offices Designation of Managers.
Senate Bill 462 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 45 votes in the affirmative. Senate Bill 462, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 507, Senator Bailey, Special Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sport Fishing License, Non-Residence License Fee.
Senate Bill 507 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 38 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 507, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 508, Senator Bailey, Hunting Non-Resident Sick Deer Stamp Fee Alteration.
Senate Bill 508 is on third reading. Chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill, taxes and fees and assessments are a hot topic this session. And our committee has actually got requests for over $25 million in fee increases already. So it's going to be on the floor a lot. But when I see a bill that has far-reaching impact, I have to make a note about it. So my concerns about this bill are threefold. One, which will not surprise you, I'm against raising taxes. But two, it will have a negative economic impact on Eastern Shore residents. And three, it is effectively a ban on low-income hunters who visit Maryland. We were told the policy need for this bill was twofold. One, to raise money. The bill came in asking for a 300% increase in the Sika deer stamp. It was amended to be a 700% increase. Policy achieved. The second policy didn't make any sense to me. It stated we wanted to discourage hunters from visiting Maryland because some parking lots were full of out-of-state license plates, despite Maryland hunters accounting for 75% of the stamps purchased. Then, when questioned about the steep increase in the fee, it was stated raising the amount would not discourage hunters from visiting Maryland. And I quote, "They are not going to not come when we raise the fees," unquote. The only one constant theme in this bill is raising more revenue. Now to my specific concerns. It raises taxes on non-residents. I have a philosophical belief against raising taxes, and my beliefs don't shift based on state borders. People should be able to keep more of their money instead of giving it to government, independent of where they live. Plus, there was no justification given for the 300% increase relative to the deer stamp service provided, and certainly not for the 700% increase. It was simply some other states are doing this, we can too. This is not a fee for a deer stamp service, but a money-generating tax increase. And secondly, this tax also hurts Maryland residents. Interestingly, the Sika deer are only on the eastern shore in Maryland, and any reduction in hunting will have a direct and negative impact on those communities. A question was asked at second reader on the previous bill, would this impact visitors coming to the eastern shore? And on that bill, the answer was no. But this bill, if you read the fiscal note, it estimates a 25% decrease of hunters coming to the eastern shore. That's close to 1,000 hunters coming to small communities on the eastern shore for a day or a weekend trip. No flights with rental cars or Ubers to the eastern shore, no hotel reservations, no restaurants, no taverns, no sports shops, etc. Even with a conservative estimate, that exceeds $500,000 in lost revenues to eastern shore businesses. That's real money for small businesses. And those lost revenues are probably much higher, as the estimate did not account for the amended 700% increase. This tax hurts Maryland residents too. Maryland is already an expensive place to live and visit, and we should be working to make it more affordable, not more expensive. And lastly, and most alarming, this bill will now effectively cut off hunting these deer from lower income visitors. For example, today, a father and their son or daughter can visit relatives in Maryland and pay $50 for a Sika deer stamp. But after this bill, it will cost them $400. Times are tough for many families, and this 700% hunting tax will make it frustrating for middle-class individuals and cost prohibitive for low-income individuals. This bill will take away an existing happiness from some simply because they do not have as much resources as others do. In closing, this point can be summed up by a line in one of my favorite movies, The Fiddler on the Roof. A young couple wanted to get married and be happy, but a poor tailor worried that he didn't have enough money to gain her father's approval. Then the daughter emphatically said to him, quote, "Even a poor tailor deserves some happiness," unquote. This bill sends the wrong message that going forward, only financially well-off visitors can hunt Sika deer, especially at a time when we are focused on a more equitable Maryland. It's time to stop blindly following states that implement regressive hunting tax policies. And for these reasons, I cannot support the bill.
Thank you, Senator. All right, let's check with one of the bill's senator from District 9 on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I learned a lot about fees on hunting this year, and I am confident that this bill brings us into other states, in line with other states. If you look at Virginia, for example, I mean, this bill is very reasonable. It costs Virginia residents $40 to purchase a special elk hunting license, and it costs us $400. In Virginia, they are charging us 10 times more to hunt elk over there than their own residents. But it's not just there. I mean, if you want to go to Minnesota and hunt a bear, the people who live there pay $45, and then we would have to pay $231. If we fancy a trip to Kentucky to hunt deer in Kentucky, which we got a lot here. I don't know why we go to Kentucky, but the residents in Kentucky pay $35, and we would have to pay $185. Now, if you wanted to hunt elk there, it would be $60 to $100 for the residents, and $400 to $500, 5 times the amount for us to hunt in Kentucky. So that's not even getting into Montana, where if you wanted to hunt a bighorn sheep, they charge only $125, and we would have to pay $1,250 to hunt bighorn sheep out there in Montana. So that is like 10 times the price. Coming to Maryland is a darn good deal if you want to hunt. And so I encourage a green vote on this bill.
All right, let's hear from Senator from the 29th District on the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think this concept is pretty easy to understand. And I would say this, that many of you know that I have children that are the age of going to college, and it all comes down to in-state tuition cost and out-of-state tuition cost, right? It's pretty simple, right? You're either in the state or you're out of the state. And I'd like to point out that there's one place out of 50 states that has a free-ranging herd of Sika deer. One state happens to be Maryland and the Maryland Eastern Shore. And when we go to other states to hunt, it's very costly. The issue that this bill came here right now is last year we got the first ever Sika stamp. And what that showed is out of 9,000 people participating, almost 3,000 people were from out of state. And the fact was, the minute we did that, what changed? The in-state residents could not find a place to park, and they couldn't go hunt a species that was right here in our own backyard, right? And that's why this bill came here, because of the fact that the number of people that I know that are hunters, outdoor enthusiasts, they said, why can't we do this in our own state? And that's why we brought it. If they want to participate, right, we should be looking out for our in-state residents first. That's why I'm going to put up a green vote. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Yes, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st District on the bill.
Thank you, and I appreciated the response. I think they supported what I was saying, and basically they're raising a lot of money. I concede that point. You can go to other states and they can do that as well. But the fact is, this hurts Maryland residents and their businesses, as Fiscal note says. And then secondly, it effectively bans low-income people from visiting our state and hunting. Let's say other states are raising it, let's raise it so high that only the well-off can hunt these. And is that really the policy we want to be sending out just because other states are banning low-income people from hunting these kind of animals? Currently, they can do it. After this bill, it'll be cost prohibitive. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, third reading, final passage, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 39 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 508, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 542, Senator Brooks, Real Estate Brokers, Brokerage Agreements Requirements.
Senate Bill 542 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. 46 votes in the affirmative. Senate Bill 542, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 585, Senator Simon Ayer, boating accidents, duty to remain at the scene, render assistance, and provide information penalties.
Senate Bill 585 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 585, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 737, Harford County Senators, Higher Education, Harford Community College Board of Trustees, alterations.
Senate Bill 737 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 737, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 864, Senator King, University at Shavy Grove Regional Higher Education Center, designation as a community of innovation.
All right, Senate Bill 864 is on third reading for final passage. Do we want to maybe push this one to tomorrow? I recognize the chair of the committee.
We special order this till appropriate time tomorrow.
Oh, sorry.
That is acceptable to
Okay, apologies. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the difference. Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. All right. If there's no objections, we'll special order the bill at the appropriate time tomorrow. All right. Let's do calendar number 25. Last one. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 533, Senator Gallion, fishing and hunting licenses and trout stamps, complimentary license and stamp exemption, veterans determined to be unemployable.
Senate Bill 533 on third reading out of the wonderful and excellent Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee. Final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 46 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 533, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, that does it. Long day. I got a lot of stuff through. Productive day. The chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district.
Yeah, I need to make a vote change, Mr. President.
Excellent. Senator received a. All right.
Gotta get a red ticket.
Headed back there. I think there might be some others. Let's go with, in the meantime, senator from District 22, and we'll come back to the senator from the 37th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be recorded in the green for SB 461. Just record it.
461 in the green. Any objections to being recorded in the green? Not a change, but green in the green. Without objection. So ordered. Uh-oh. Yes, chair recognizes the senator from District 2.
So I've submitted the form. Do I have to make the request again?
Yes, to make the motion.
All
So
right.
the form opens up the ability to make the motion.
So
in
form
order.
first, gotcha.
Yes, right, perfect.
Senate Bill 192 from no to yes.
And it appears the secretary does have it. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, so ordered. Senator has the form to be turned in. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded in the green for Senate Bill 507. 507.
507. All right, if the page could please make sure that we bring it down to the secretary so that we have it. 507 from red to green. Any objections? Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Excellent. All right, perfect. And we've got a record of it. Any further issues on calendars? If not, let's go ahead and check in with our committees. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance will meet at 1 o'clock for 12 bill hearings. Thank you.
Busy day. Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Triple E, also known as the Donkey Committee, I think you mentioned earlier.
Clydesdale.
Yeah, Clydesdale. We have 14 bills today beginning at 1 p.m. In addition to our star witness from District 47, Dr. Augustine, we have 155 witnesses on these 14 bills. So members of the Triple E Committee, please keep your questions very, very tight.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Careful of airtime in Triple E today. Chair of Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today at 1 o'clock we have full committee budget hearings, and then at 2:30 we'll have capital budget.
All right. Thank you. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will meet directly following floor for a voting session. We have 2 bills, and then we'll follow that with bill hearings. We have 13 bills, over 100 witnesses.
Whew, busy day in JPR. All right. To voting, then bills. Additional standing committees. Select committees. Delegations. Caucus. Yes, Chair of the Montgomery County Delegation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Montgomery County Senate colleagues, please put on your calendar this Thursday immediately following floor session. We will be meeting to start voting on a very long list of local bills that have been sent over by our House colleagues. So that'll be in the Verta Welcome Room immediately following floor session Thursday.
Thursday.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator. Any further delegations? Yes, Chair of the Prince George's County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Prince George's County tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, Neal Conference Room delegation.
All right. Tomorrow night, Senator?
Tomorrow night, yes.
Tomorrow night, 5 o'clock. Excellent. Other delegations? Senator from District 11.
Caucus?
Yes, please.
Announcements? Thank you. I just wanted to follow up and remind folks that our guests that the chair of Triple E announced earlier today are over in the Cade Room if people would like to hear from them directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator. All right, any further announcements? Anything else for the good of the order? If not, let's do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 46 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate of Maryland stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday.
Without objection, so ordered. 10 a.m. Have a wonderful and productive day, everyone. See you tomorrow.